Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Extremely excited to be recording on the best futures in the NBA. Now remember, this is a part 2 video. I recorded this exact same style of video prior to the NBA draft, but after taking some time to really reflect on which prospects ended up in which situations, giving myself time to think and analyze what I like about each move and ultimately what I like about each team's long-term direction now, including their draft assets and everything that they own. I have now compiled my best NBA futures with some real tweaks to that original top 10 list. I'm extremely excited about this video. I hope you guys are as well. If you do enjoy the content today, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. And let's jump into it here now with that video preview. Again, like I mentioned in the open, these are 10 teams with the best futures ranked. Now, this is a very subjective list. I'm sure that my top 10 will look very different from your top 10. So first of all, I want you to hear me out. I want you to listen to my reasoning, my rationale. And again, we're looking at long-term potential to win championships and maybe not even form dynasties, but really be a great team for a long time. And I want you to come to your own conclusions as well. We can disagree, just make sure we do so civilly. This is, remember, post offseason, so after free agency, after the NBA draft. We are going to analyze some of the young prime talent on these teams, the new CBA ramifications, the impact of trying to keep some of your players around, and obviously the luxury tax that hurts some specific markets more so than others, so keep that in mind as well throughout this video. And then we'll also talk about access to draft picks. All of those things matter. How much young talent do you have? How much current veteran talent do you have? How is your team going to operate with the new CBA? And how many draft picks and top-end draft picks will your team have over the next few years? And remember, for the viewpoint, this is roughly the next 5 to 7 years. So some of the teams that are at the top right now, you will see featured on this list. There are also other teams sprinkled throughout that maybe aren't quite at the summit yet, aren't quite at the tipping point, but they'll get there relatively soon if I had to guess. So team number 10, I have the Memphis Grizzlies. And as you can notice, this was a team that was excluded the first time around because I had a huge question mark about their center position, but they addressed that significantly in the 2024 NBA draft, kind of calming some of my concerns around the team drafting Zach Edey out of Purdue. Now, I still do have a problem with the way that this team is constructed. I think come playoff time, those implications will be showcased quite a bit. But what they do have, and this is a fair point that a lot of you made in the last video in the comment section, which remember, I want you to comment, leave your thoughts on this video as well. In the last video of this series that I recorded, a lot of people were saying that I am sleeping on Ja Morant. And if you go back to any of my coverage on Ja Morant on this channel, you should know, first of all, that that's not true. I actually had him ranked above Zion Williamson in their draft class respectively. I think I was the only person on the planet who believed that, and I think so far with how their careers have panned out, the Grizzlies have made it out of the first round multiple times. The Pelicans have yet to do so with Zion Williamson. A large part of that is health, obviously, but I do think Ja Morant is one of the best individual players in the world when it comes to advantage creation, getting to the rim, drawing, generating fouls, and obviously making spectacular plays as well. I think in a lot of ways, Ja Morant is what most people want Anthony Edwards to be. And what I mean by that is, if you look at Minnesota, the way that the Wolves won this year, this most recent season, they were very much a defense-first team with Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels being at the heart of the team's actual identity. And at times, the offense really struggled, despite having a good collection of talented offensive players, which is an interesting thing to evaluate. On the flip side for Memphis, it just always feels like Ja Morant is going to get them their best shot. It feels like he's going to make the right play 9 or 8 times out of 10 most often. And with his athleticism, he makes a lot of those same or similar wow plays that we have seen out of Anthony Edwards as well. Ja Morant is one of those freak athletes, a player that I have never been sleeping on. So I want to make sure that is very clear here. The issue, though, I do see with Memphis, and the reason why they're down at 10 despite having a top-tier talent like Ja Morant, well, there's a lot of question marks still. First of all, they have some interesting young wings. Vince Williams Jr. Definitely broke onto the scene last year. I think he had a very, very good season for himself. There's also a lot of optimism around G.G. Jackson, a player who I think's an interesting player. I think there is talent there to work with. The question for me, though, is does he ever take that step into becoming a live dribble passer? If not, I don't really see exactly how he fits into this core nucleus around Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Zach Edey, because he feels like a little bit of a ball stopper to me. So that's going to be a big emphasis, hopefully, from Taylor Jenkins and the coaching staff there around Gigi Jackson's development process. If he doesn't take meaningful steps forward in that area, I do think Vince Williams Jr. is the better option for them in their starting lineup and around their lineup. Obviously, they have Marcus Smart as well, so they have definitely ways to play and kind of toggle their starting lineup if they want to. And then obviously getting Zach Edey is huge. This is going to help them significantly on the boards, boxing out, getting on the offensive glass, which has been a staple of Grizzlies basketball during the Ja Morant era of play. And I do think Jaren Jackson Jr. obviously gets to be relegated back to his shot blocking power forward role where he was able to win the Defensive Player of the Year, although in my opinion probably not deserved that season. I think it should have went to Brook Lopez, but that is not the reality of what happened. So maybe Jaren Jackson Jr. can return back to his decoy form, and then Zach Edey obviously having just a 7'4" behemoth around the rim. If you want to win regular season games, having talented size, big size, and rim protection is one of the easiest ways to do so. We saw that with Minnesota this year. Milwaukee typically is toward the top of the league in wins because they have Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez. Obviously the Sixers with Joel Embiid. We even saw in the playoffs how important Kristaps Porzingis was for Boston when it came to rim protection, how much easier it was for them to win when Porzingis was healthy and in the lineup. So skilled size is always super important, especially in the regular season. When it comes to winning a lot of games, Zach Edey is going to help them a lot. The reason I have them all the way down at 10, though, I am very skeptical of this team come postseason time, and it's not because of Ja Morant, it's not even because of Desmond Bane, it's because of the front court. I think that there are some real spacing limitations. Unless Jaren Jackson Jr. continues to develop and blossom as a three-point shooter, I am very, very hesitant on his ability to be a great offensive power forward. I think if you really wanted to maximize Jaren Jackson Jr. offensively, you would have to take a similar approach with him as to what has happened in Kristaps Porzingis' career, where back when Porzingis was playing power forward in Dallas, a lot of the two-man game between Luka and Porzingis was kind of mute or not useful because teams could just switch that action pretty comfortably. And yes, Jaren Jackson Jr. I think is quite a bit functionally stronger than Kristaps Porzingis. I also still don't think that even if you post up mismatches, that is a very feasible way of winning playoff games in 2024, 2025. So as a result, it feels like Jaren Jackson Jr.'s offensive potential is a little limited, especially if we compare it to maybe Miles Turner in Indiana, who at the 5 gives Indiana this kind of cheat code center where there's not really an option for other teams to hide their rim protector on, their center on. You go back to Indiana's play against Milwaukee this season, including the regular season and the postseason. Brook Lopez and the Milwaukee Bucks struggled significantly in that series because they just did not have a way of effectively guarding Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner in the two-man game, the pick-and-pop game. And when you have such an easy option on offense, it makes your offensive game plan, offensive attack so much cleaner, so much smoother. And I feel like Memphis is kind of lacking that because of Zach Edey's presence. It kind of takes away some of the dynamism of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s ability to roll to the rim and play as a screener. And then I also just don't know if there's enough spacing with the two of them together as both likely lesser shooting bigs. Jaren Jackson Jr. definitely capable of knocking down perimeter shots. Zach Edey, there's some optimism that maybe he will be able to, but I'm a little bit more skeptical on that, which he doesn't need to be. He's a very good drop coverage big. He's going to be an excellent rim roller. I think he's going to play very similar to Ivica Zubac, but as a bigger version, which is really exciting and enticing. But I also think come playoff time, even though your best offense is probably with Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5, defensively we know that cannot survive, especially if you look at how the team played this year. Now, I'm not saying that this season is, it's all because Jaren Jackson Jr. had to play more center minutes. That's not the reason that they were bad this year solely, but I do think that Jaren Jackson Jr.'s rebounding woes and some of the deficiencies on that end of the floor, comparing him from an anchor to a shot blocker, I think he's more of a shot blocker than an anchor. So I think that they have a real problem here. And for years, I've been calling it the Jaren Jackson Jr. problem. I do think at some point he'll end up getting traded, honestly, because I think at some point management there will realize that Jaren Jackson Jr. is at the heart of some of their postseason problems. So it'll be a fascinating situation to monitor. The Grizzlies still have a very bright future. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a great player. John Morant's an elite player. Desmond Bane's a great player. Zach Edey has a chance to be a very, very good NBA player. They have some interesting young wings. I like the direction of this team. I just think that there's going to have to be some moves in here, which puts a little bit of risk. When you have to make some trades down the road, it also puts some risk in the way of maybe you mess things up. So we'll see what happens here with Memphis, but they are a very good team currently and will be for the next 5 to 7 years for sure. At number 9, I have the Orlando Magic, who have actually slid down a couple of spots since my last ranking, but I still am very optimistic on the Orlando Magic. I've received some comments, even in my top 5 defenses video where I included the Orlando Magic, that I've been an Orlando Magic hater. I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from. In fact, I feel like I've been more optimistic about Orlando than most people, honestly. I do think that this team has a very bright future. They have 2 very exciting two-way forwards in Franz Wagner, who I think is well worth that rookie max extension he signed, and also Paolo Banchero, who is the long-term face of the franchise. I've also included Jalen Suggs here on the graphic because I do think he is an integral piece of their long-term future. Very similar to how Derek White has been such a renaissance for the Boston Celtics, and obviously getting Drew Holiday as well helped them win an NBA title. I think Jalen Suggs kind of fits in that same kind of mold, which is what I've been saying for years, even going back to pre-draft content on him coming out of Gonzaga. If you go back and watch those videos, I have compared him multiple times to a Drew Holiday type player, and I think that is what he is blossoming into. For Orlando, I think, again, one of the big things for them is at some point they're going to have to take a swing on somebody to improve their offense. They're an elite defense. They've got a lot of length, size, athleticism. They're a fast team. They've got impressive defensive players. I haven't even mentioned Jonathan Isaac yet, who I think per minute is the best defender in the entire association. I'm a big believer in this team right now, but I just think unless Jett Howard turns into this awesome, like 30-minute per game floor spacing shooter for them, which maybe that's possible, I have some skepticism about where their offensive attack is going to go. Now, they did add Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That was a good 3-and-D addition. I think the Magic will be slightly better this upcoming season offensively than they were a year ago, but I just do think that they still need another uptick offensively. They need to add a little bit more offensive talent over the next few years. I do like Anthony Black as a long-term prospect for them. Obviously, Orlando has some interesting pieces. They drafted Tristan da Silva as well. I'm excited about this team's future for sure. I think they have a lot of talent, a lot of young talent, and a lot of talent that does mesh together pretty well, especially defensively from a team defense construct. I do think, though, for me, the one thing I'm concerned about is if they make enough threes. If you go back to this last postseason, the team that made more threes in their series typically won the series. That's something Orlando still needs a little bit more of. So that's where some of the potential Jett Howard exudes is extremely important, because he is one of those natural three-point shooters that could fit in very well without jeopardizing their length, athleticism, and size. But at the same time, I still think that maybe just another little uptick somewhere, Anthony Simons has been a name I have floated multiple times. We could see if they get involved with some other player. I talked about DeJounte Murray a lot before he got traded to the Pelicans. I do think Orlando just needs a little bit more offense, but their 2 star forwards in Banchero and Wagner aren't even near their prime yet, so maybe their own individual progression could take them like kind of a tier above where they currently sit, which is a very, very, very good NBA team. Moving on to number 8, I have the Dallas Mavericks. And yes, I am a Dallas Mavericks fan, but you guys know, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you can call me anything in the world except for biased. Typically, I'm in fact harsher on the Dallas Mavericks than most, but with their most recent NBA Finals run, and I kind of think the changing of the scenario here, where a year ago, if you go back to some of my videos from 2023 and even 2022, I was fairly pessimistic about the long-term future of the Dallas Mavericks, because I thought there was a lot of danger that Luka Doncic could potentially at some point either ask for a trade or flat out leave in free agency. And anytime you lose a superstar player like that, your franchise is headed toward the toilet for at least a little while. Now, I do think, though, there has been a lot that has transpired in the last 12 to 24 months that has completely shifted that. Some of those things I've been wrong about. I was very, very skeptical of the Kyrie Irving trade. He has fit in extremely well. Obviously, I wasn't doubting it for basketball reasons, more so for culture and locker room reasons, because there's been so many problems swirling around Kyrie Irving for some time, but the Mavericks have really embraced him. I think he has fit in extremely well with the roster and the team itself, and with some of the additions, especially drafting Dereck Lively II in the 2023 NBA draft, a pick that I gave an A grade to, the Mavericks have really changed the future outlook of the team because, again, just like I talked about earlier, the importance of size and rim protection and winning during the regular season is undoubtable. Drafting Dereck Lively, he's the Mavericks anchor. They also traded for Daniel Gafford. I think having 48 minutes of high-quality center play is at the forefront of winning in the NBA. You look at, again, I've referenced Minnesota earlier, having multiple big men who can play in unique styles and protect the rim and offer size, length, and athleticism, and obviously some offensive skill in there too, whether it's Gobert's screen setting or Karl-Anthony Towns' floor spacing or Naz Reid's ability to kind of play off of a live handle. Minnesota's been extremely impressive. Obviously, they're a little bit of an older roster. They've got some long-term questions for sure. But Dallas, I think, kind of fits into that same mold. But what they do have that the Wolves don't is a top 2, top 3 player in the world in Luka Doncic, who I would argue is the best player in the world right now. With his recent play getting to the NBA Finals, I just flat out think he's such a good floor raiser and also a ceiling lifter that he is just such a unique talent where when teams play to his style and when he has the basketball in his hands, again, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a good thing happen for your team. He puts so much pressure on a defense. He's a playoff riser, even despite scoring 34 points per game in the regular season this past year. He gets even better in the playoffs, playing through injuries at times, playing through pain. He still goes out there and performs at a very high level, even when the lights get brighter. You think about his performance in the Western Conference Finals, willing Dallas over Minnesota. I just think the long-term future of this Dallas Mavericks team is extremely bright. They still have some access to tradable draft picks as well, which is important to note. They went out in free agency this year, got Klay Thompson. They also added in Najee Marshall. We're going to have a video coming up on the channel soon kind of detailing Klay Thompson's role in Dallas and how that will help their entire roster, not just Luka Doncic, not just Kyrie Irving. We're going to give kind of a season preview for the Dallas Mavericks coming up soon. So if you're a Mavericks fan, make sure to subscribe and leave a like as well. And Kyrie Irving, he, again, just super talented player, played really well in the 2024 playoffs. I think there's still, I think there's 3-4 more years left of his real prime before he starts to maybe take a little bit of a step back. But Kyrie Irving's just such a unique, talented player in the league. The Mavericks, I feel really good about. Now, a team I have to give an honorable mention to is the Minnesota Timberwolves. They will not make my top 10 list because of the absence of draft picks, but I did really love their trade for Rob Dillingham. I do think that they are right on the borderline cusp of being a top 10 future in the NBA. It was really them and Memphis as the kind of toss-up spots. At number 10, I do think the ownership crisis there in Minnesota is the biggest reason for my exclusion of them on the list today. Now going into number 7, the Denver Nuggets. And for a lot of the same reasons I just listed about Dallas being a top 10 future, it really comes down to who is driving the boat. And for Denver, it really just comes down to the fact that they have Nikola Jokic. Now, I do have something I need to say about Jamal Murray. After watching him in person in the playoffs, after being around the Denver Nuggets quite a bit this season and seeing their team up close and personal, I think that Jamal Murray owes a lot to Nikola Jokic. I think Jamal Murray would not be nearly the same caliber player if he was playing on any of the other 29 teams in the NBA. I think the parity and the quality of these two guys together makes them a really special duo because of Jamal Murray's ability to kind of play in the in-between game, kind of finagle through defenses, give Jokic time to roll, get to certain spots on the floor, play out of the pocket. Jamal Murray is a perfect fit with Nikola Jokic, but I don't think Jamal Murray is this elite, transcendent player like he performs sometimes in the playoffs. And I think, yes, with Nikola Jokic, so much gravity exists there as a role man, as a hub of their offense, that it makes Jamal Murray's life so much easier. And I think Jamal Murray as a number 2 in Denver looks way better than it would if Jamal Murray was a number 2, say, in Los Angeles with LeBron James, or a number 2, say, in Dallas with Luka Doncic instead of Kyrie Irving. I think the relationship between these two guys as basketball players on the floor is such a perfect pairing that it has made Jamal Murray look way better as a player than he truly actually is. And that's not to be harsh or skeptical of Jamal Murray. He's a great player, but I just think that his career has really panned out super well, and he's made so much money because of his on-court play alongside Nikola Jokic. That would have looked way different with any other player in the entire NBA, but that is a testament to how good Jokic is. The Nuggets just lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They have some real financial crises when it comes to the CBA, which is the reason why they're not in my top 5 here. It is very clear that the Nuggets are not going to be breaking the bank to keep their championship roster around. They let Bruce Brown go 2 off seasons ago. They let KCP walk this past offseason. The Nuggets are kind of in an interesting spot when it comes to retaining their own talent, but as long as you have Nikola Jokic on your roster, you're going to have a real chance at being in contention for an NBA title. And I don't think it's going to get any easier for teams in the West to slow him down. Even the Minnesota Timberwolves, the team that was best equipped to kind of slow down and stop Nikola Jokic. Well, Jokic was so good that he pushed the series to 7 games. Had an unbelievable stretch of shot making throughout different points of that series as well. So Jokic, an impressive player, and we'll see what happens with Denver going forward. But as long as he's on the roster, they have a top 10 future in the NBA for sure. Now at number 6, the Indiana Pacers here. Obviously, Tyrese Halliburton is the player that makes it all tick. He is the engine for their offense. But getting Pascal Siakam was also extremely huge. Kind of gave them that number 2 of their half-court offense that they needed. Andrew Nembhard played extremely well in the regular season. Aaron Nesmith, I think, is on one of the better contracts in the entire NBA as a 3-and-D type player who can do a little bit more than that. A phrase that I've been saying quite a bit over the last few years is 3-and-D plus. I think that really perfectly embodies what Aaron Nesmith is. They also have some young pieces in Jarris Walker, Benedict Mathurin, who, if both of those guys kind of find their real footing in the league and really establish themselves, the Indiana Pacers look terrifying. Miles Turner is that cheat code offensive piece. Him and Pascal Siakam are such a good offensive pairing together because of Turner's ability to stretch the floor, play out of the pick and pop game, but also function as a dynamic roll man. Siakam obviously attacks the closets extremely well. Spicy P is the spin master. I swear to God, every time I watch Pascal Siakam play, it probably makes me want to throw my TV remote at the screen because I'm saying, how in the hell do these teams not know that his spin move is coming? But the reality is they do know it's coming. It's just he's so good at it and times it so well that he gets himself to open space pretty much every single time. It's honestly, he just spams spin moves, but it just works for him because of the kind of pressure he puts downhill, and then obviously being able to play off of that and know when to go to that spin move and when not to. But you see a player silhouette here on the left of your screen. You might be saying, what is that all about? You haven't seen that on any of the other graphics. The Pacers traded 3 first-round picks to get Pascal Siakam. 2 of them conveyed in the 2024 NBA draft. So with that being the case, the Pacers actually still have a large amount of trade flexibility, and they're going to have some players on very tradable contracts with real interest around the league. Obviously, Nembhard is one of those guys. Jarris Walker would be another player who has significant trade value around the league. Benedict Mathurin would have trade value around the league. Aaron Nesmith would have significant trade value around the league. I can go on and on and on about all of the players that Indiana has that would really garner interest from other NBA teams. And with that being the case, Indiana has actually a very large asset collection. So who is that final player going to be? Could it be another addition into the front court like a Lauri Markkanen, where the Pacers would play way bigger than everybody, kind of help their defense a little bit by offering more size, but also not sacrificing their offensive identity by having the floor spacing of a Lauri Markkanen, who over 80% of his baskets in 2023-2024 were assisted. Imagine that type of player playing with Tyrese Halliburton. That is a perfect pairing. But also for Indiana, instead of maybe Lauri Markkanen, could it be another guard type player? Could it be a shooting guard who gives some real scoring punch, like a Devin Booker if he were to become available in the next 12 to 24 months? The Pacers have the draft capital and the young players and the kind of assets that they need to swing a big trade coming soon. And I think if Indiana does that and they pick the right player, they go after the right guy to fit not only Halliburton's game, which is very easy to fit, but also Halliburton's timeline with a guy in his mid to late 20s, like a Devin Booker, like a Lauri Markkanen. That's where Indiana could really turn up the heat on some of these other Eastern Conference teams, which is why I have them above teams like Denver and Dallas, who are already currently, I would say, more established than Indiana in terms of their overall roster. I think Indiana's knocking on the door, though, and they have the long-term potential to add one more top-end talent guy to an already great existing group of players. They can afford to sacrifice their depth a little bit. Obi Toppin's another great example of a player who could maybe be used in a trade at a later date. He had a very good postseason for himself, in my opinion. So I think for Indiana, if they're going out and getting one more player, it could completely change the outlook of this team and taking them from an Eastern Conference Finals team to a true contender in the NBA, which I'm extremely excited for Indiana. I love the way that they play. Obviously, got to watch Rick Carlisle coach my Dallas Mavericks for a long time. I like seeing him have success in Indiana again. So congratulations to the Pacers. I feel very optimistic about their long-term future. And I think Halliburton is obviously such a good offensive engine that they're going to have so much success with him over the next decade or so. Now at number 5, I have the Houston Rockets. And this team is loaded with young talent. I think one of the best collections of young talent in the entire NBA. They drafted Reed Sheppard 3rd overall. You guys know for months and months and months here on the channel, I have been raving about Reed Sheppard as a potential fit for the Houston Rockets. They drafted him. He had a tremendous summer league. And I think everyone started to see what I've been saying for months on end about how not only is he a perfect fit for the Houston Rockets, he's also just flat out a great player. The ability to shoot the ball off the dribble, play off the catch as well. He is a dynamic offensive player because of his ability to handle and to play without having to handle the ball. That is extremely impressive, and I think for Houston specifically, getting this type of perimeter shooting talent around a team that didn't have a ton of floor spacing last year will be a real renaissance to their offense. I also want to mention Steven Adams, who will be a tremendous backup center for them, probably the best backup center in the NBA. If I had to kind of rank right now, that's probably where I would have him ranked, is at the top of all backup reserve center in the association. Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, I think those two guys have limitless potential. Cam Whitmore is a player I've compared to Jaylen Brown, who just won an NBA Finals MVP. Now, I'm not sure Cam Whitmore will ever win that award or not, but I do think he has that type of upside, that type of talent. You also look at Amen Thompson as a player who I think could really break a ton of basketball analytics as an elite rebounding point guard with real point guard feel. The only thing that really needs to come along for him in two areas is his ball handling and his shooting. If his shooting comes along, it's wraps for the league. He could become the best player in the entire NBA because he's got freakish size, length, athleticism, quickness, defensive upside, rebounding. And he just does a lot of things extremely well. And if he learns how to shoot the ball at a respectable to good clip, he is unbelievably dominant in the NBA. And then obviously if he improves his handle, that will help him get to spots a little bit quicker, beat defenders off the dribble a little bit more. Now part of that is coupled with the shooting. If teams have to respect him a little bit more on the three-point line, he will be able to get to the rim a little bit easier as well, because instead of having a defender taking off of him, he will be able to blow by them on the perimeter more frequently. And then the Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün dynamic. I want to reference ESPN's Tim McMahon, who constantly feeds into the Houston Rockets beef in their own fan base about which one of these two guys will be there long term. Will it be Jalen Green? Will it be Alperen Şengün? I just want to tell everyone to shut up, okay? Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün are both Houston Rockets presently, and they should be going forward. You do not trade your number 2 overall pick on his rookie contract. You do not do that. You do not trade Alperen Şengün, who is one of the league's best young players, on his rookie contract. If the Houston Rockets do that, take them off this list, okay? If they go trade for Kevin Durant, take them off this list. I do not believe that this team should be making a super aggressive move. I like the way that their roster is currently built with veterans like Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, 2 high-impact veterans already on their roster, a collection of a lot of young talent. I haven't even mentioned Jabari Smith yet. I haven't even mentioned Tari Eason yet. This team is stacked with young talent. You do not trade Jalen Green. You do not trade Alperen Şengün. I think that would be completely ridiculous. This team won 40-plus games last year. They're going to continue to get better. They added in talent. They added in Reed Sheppard. Tari Eason will get to play this next season. I think Houston's in a tremendous spot moving forward. And if they trade one of these 2 young, blossoming players, I think it would be extremely short-sighted and extremely stupid and a real mistake by Rafael Stone a mistake I do not expect him to actually make. I think Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün will be in Houston long term. I think that they have the potential to be the two best players on a very, very great team, as long as they give this thing time to develop and blossom, and they allow Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün to continue working together and featuring them both in their offense together. I think there's some real spacing concerns from where Ime Udoka's offense has players standing. If you look at the actual spacing on the floor, it's not about the shooting as much as it's about where their actual placement is. He doesn't utilize the deep corner very much in his offense. So I think for the Rockets, finding ways to space a little bit better for each other will make Jalen Green a lot better, and obviously the addition of Reed Shepherd will make Alperen Şengün's life a little bit easier as a post scorer as well. So Houston, I'm very optimistic on. I really don't want to see them make a giant trade. If they jeopardize their future going after Kevin Durant in his mid to late 30s, I think that is a very significant mistake, and one that I hope we do not see them actually make in the upcoming years. Moving on to number 4, I have the New York Knicks, a team that is a little bit better currently constituted than the Houston Rockets. The Knicks were a team that was so close to making the Eastern Conference Finals, of course, came up a little bit short in Game 7 against the Indiana Pacers in Round 2 of the 2024 NBA playoffs, but they made a significant addition to their roster. Yes, they lost Isaiah Hartenstein, but they added in one of the best two-way wings in the entire NBA in Mikal Bridges, a player that I thought a lot of teams should have been in on. There were some interesting teams in on him, including the Utah Jazz, but New York ultimately landed the former Villanova player, and the Nova Knicks are in full effect with Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and Mikal Bridges. The New York Knicks are loaded with present-day talent and players who are in the early stages or heart of their prime. This team is going to be so good over the next 5 years. It is ridiculous. They are also getting Julius Randle back, who didn't even play real playoff minutes for them because of his injuries. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson deals with so many injuries as well. I think that's the one shortcoming you can maybe point to for this New York Knicks team over the next couple of years, is their center play and how much money they already have committed to this roster after extending OG Anunoby and after getting Mikal Bridges. Now, luckily, Jalen Brunson did take a big pay cut for them to keep this team together. They have Julius Randle as a real trade chip. It'll be interesting to see if they move him for an actual center over the next couple of years or not. But depending on Mitchell Robinson's health, this team could be a real finals contender this year because of their overall collection of talent. Jalen Brunson plays way bigger than he is. He plays with a chip on his shoulder, and he is a natural-born winner and a natural-born killer. He is, anytime he steps on the floor, a real threat to be the best player on the floor. He was a top 5, top 6-ish NBA player this past season. He's a dominant point guard, one of the most heliocentric players in the league. Very similar to Luka Doncic in the way that he plays, the way that he dominates the basketball, and the way that he makes winning plays in that type of role. Jalen Brunson is such a dominant individual player. The New York Knicks are flush with real NBA talent and top-end NBA talent as well. One of the best rotations in the entire NBA. Haven't even gotten to Tyler Kolek, Miles McBride. This team is stacked, loaded, extremely talented. I love the long-term future of the New York Knicks, and I think they're a team that's going to be a real threat to be reckoned with in the Eastern Conference. At number 3, I have the San Antonio Spurs, and I like their young roster. I really do. I love Devin Vassell. I've liked him for a long time coming out of Florida State. I like Stephon Castle quite a bit as well. Now, I do think the point guard experiment with him will be interesting. It could go either phenomenally well, or it could go kind of questionably. And if it goes questionably, then you have a big question of who their point guard is going into next year's draft. Would they draft someone like Nolan Traore or Dylan Harper? That would be a real possibility depending on how the first year of Stephon Castle's career plays out this upcoming season. But let's be real. The real reason San Antonio is top 3 in the NBA for the long-term future, in my opinion, is solely on the shoulders of Victor Wembanyama, who I think within the next 2 years will become the best player in the entire NBA. If I had to bet, he makes an All-NBA team this year. I think this past season he played at an all-star level, especially to close out the year. He was unbelievable. I think he will make an All-NBA spot, which designates him as a top 15 player in the NBA. He will probably win Defensive Player of the Year in 2025. He is a freak of nature. He is an alien, as LeBron James stated. I think the biggest thing for Victor Wembanyama is to kind of figure out his go-to move. And once he figures that out, his offensive game will get a lot easier and he will become more efficient. I think right now, when you watch him play, he is just so skilled that there are so many different things he can do. He doesn't have that go-to, I'm going to do this type of move. You think about some of the legends in the NBA, Michael Jordan having his post game. You think about Dirk Nowitzki with the post fade specifically. You think about Kobe Bryant being able to play out of pivots. You think about Luka Doncic going to his step back three, James Harden's step back three. Some of the best individual offensive talents. Kevin Durant with his hezzy pull-up. Like, some of the best players ever in NBA history have one go-to move to go to when they need to get a basket. And Victor Wembanyama currently doesn't have that. Once he finds that shot, once he finds that move that he wants to go to score every single time, he will become unstoppable because he is so tall. You cannot defend him one-on-one. Sending doubles doesn't even help because he's still taller than the second guy. He's an elite passer. He is just a tremendous player. And I think right now if he can cut down on the turnovers, dribble the ball a little bit less frequently, play more as a roll man, which is something I talked about pre-draft with him. I think modeling his game offensively after Rudy Gobert a little bit more would be so good for his overall efficiency. Now I know some people are going to say, wait, what? Trust me on that. You just have to watch the film on Rudy Gobert, see the way that he plays, screens, dives, rolls, puts rim pressure on. If you used a more skilled player like Victor Wembanyama in that exact same role, Wemby could average 25 points a game without dribbling the ball at all. That's how big, good, talented he is around the rim. I just think for the Spurs now, it's about finding ways to get him into spots, let him play his game efficiently, and obviously having Chris Paul is going to help a lot with that too. So I do think the Spurs still in a spot where they're not going to be an elite team this upcoming season, but they added some veterans who can help Wembanyama take a little bit of a step forward in his own individual development. And I think for that reason, the Spurs are going to go as far as Wemby can take them, which is realistically championship upside, championship potential within the next 3 or 4 years. I think that's how close he is to being ready to being an NBA contending type player. Very similar to the way that we saw Luka Doncic kind of uplift the Dallas Mavericks to NBA Finals contention. Think back to their 2022 Western Conference Finals run. I think Wembanyama could be capable of something similar to that over the next few years. So the Spurs have an extremely bright future, and it really all lies on the shoulders of Victor Wembanyama. Number 2, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who made some significant upgrades to their current roster, obviously with Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein being the two most prominent ones. After trading away Josh Giddey, they solved some of their offensive concerns, although I think they kind of created some others by bringing in Hartenstein, moving Chet Holmgren to some more power forward minutes, although not all the time, but some of the time. I do think will be semi-problematic for them offensively, and I think it will dampen some of Chet Holmgren's offensive efficiency a bit, but I think defensively they're going to be the best team defensively in the entire NBA this upcoming season. They have players who can defend on all 3 levels. They've got tremendous on-ball defenders in Lou Dort, Alex Caruso. Jalen Williams doesn't get enough credit for his defense either. This OKC Thunder team is extremely special. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the headliner as an MVP candidate, a player who just continues to get better and better and better year after year after year. One of the most functional ball handlers in the NBA. He doesn't get praised for his handle enough, but he creates so much out of isolation. He creates so much with the ball in his hands. He is purely one of the best dribblers in the entire NBA. Chet Holmgren is a special two-way player, especially with his ability to protect the rim, block shots, defend on the perimeter a bit as well. He is just extremely special, utilizing his length, size, and hip fluidity on that end of the floor. And then J-Dub obviously has the potential to continue growing as a player. He's been so efficient so early in his career. Those 3 guys are really the headliners for the future of OKC. They have access to so many draft picks. They have so many good players currently on the roster as well. You think about some players that I haven't even mentioned yet in, say, Aaron Wiggins and obviously Isaiah Joe. They've just got so much talent. They drafted Nikola Topic. They drafted Dylan Mitchell, a good pick there. And they drafted just a lot of real talent. AJ Mitchell, a player I love. They got him in the 2nd round, which was incredible. He showed out all summer league long. This Thunder team has so much talent. They have so much future draft capital as well. The Thunder are clearly one of the 2 best futures in the entire NBA, which leads me now into number 1. And the only reason I have the Boston Celtics above the Oklahoma City Thunder Well, there's two reasons really. One, they've been there, done that now. We've seen them win an NBA championship with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum co-leading them to their finals win over the Dallas Mavericks. But then secondly, their ownership has clearly shown the willingness to spend a lot of money. Now, I know the Celtics are currently up for sale, but you would have to guess, looking at the current financials of the team, whoever would buy the Boston Celtics, buy this ginormous brand, would then understand that, hey, I've got a lot of money committed to these players. I'm going to be in the luxury tax and above the second apron for a long time. And I think the Celtics have made some really smart moves. I think Brad Stevens is arguably the best GM in all of basketball, maybe even the best GM in all of sports for what he's been capable of doing. He brought in Derek White via trade a few years ago. He brought in Drew Holiday via trade this past offseason. He gave up nearly nothing to get Kristaps Porzingis, trading Marcus Smart for Porzingis and 2 first-round picks. He obviously coached Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. He understands what those two players were as talents, and he's put on the right types of pieces around them to finally get over the mountaintop, get to the top, and win an NBA title with the Jays. It was an extremely impressive run by Boston. Not only did they just win, but I think they're set up to probably repeat and at least have a very good chance at repeating this upcoming year. Now, it's not going to be easy. Indiana's a really good team. New York's a really good team in the East. Those are going to be some tough uphill battles. Philadelphia got better with Paul George as well. And then on the flip side in the West, obviously Denver would be a tough battle for them. Minnesota, Dallas. There's a bunch of teams that I think got better this offseason that could really push Boston in a 7-game series. But the Celtics should still be the favorites to win the NBA title this upcoming year. Porzingis is such a cheat code for them offensively. That is my favorite thing about Brad Stevens as a GM. His understanding of how his own coach wants to play, giving his coach the types of pieces he needs to execute his offensive and defensive game plan, and then adding talent in the draft as well. Baylor Shireman, a player who I had a lottery grade on in the 2024 NBA draft. Brad Stevens grabs him with the last pick of the first round, an extremely talented offensive player who can fit in a Joe Ingles type of role for Boston. The biggest thing for drafting for the Boston Celtics over the next few years will not be getting high upside, unique, talented players. It'll be getting players who can fill certain specific roles for this team. Baylor Shireman has deep range. He can shoot the basketball. He can play with the ball in his hands, can play make for others a little bit. I just think this is the right infusion of talent and young talent for a Celtics team that needs to continue replenishing their depth. That'll be one of the biggest issues with the second apron. It'll be hard for Boston to kind of toggle and make decisions and changes over the next few years that will replenish their depth. So drafting players like a Baylor Shireman, keeping some of their bench talent around like Peyton Pritchard. They were able to keep some of their backup bigs in Luke Cornett and also Xavier Tillman. I think the Celtics have been very, very smart. I think Brad Stevens gives me so much confidence that the Celtics will be the best team over the next 5 to 7 years. I could see them winning 1 or 2 more titles potentially, which is really, really impressive. So hats off to Brad Stevens, hats off to the Boston Celtics for being the best future in the NBA in my estimation. Now, if you have your own thoughts or some questions you want to ask me, please share those in the comment section. Remember, it's a very difficult exercise. Sometimes we're splitting hairs with these teams. Maybe OKC has a better future than Boston. It's extremely close, right? So it's not like, oh, this is a huge giant canyon drop-off cliff between these two teams. Sometimes the gaps are like literally this big. Like Minnesota, I wanted to include, I only had 10 spots. So which team was I going to pull off? I thought about pulling off Orlando. I thought about pulling off Memphis. But it's like, well, do I actually believe that? I don't know. Minnesota's a little bit older than some of those teams in some key positions. So it was kind of tough for me, but I did ultimately exclude Minnesota. But let me know in the comment section what you think, how you feel. And remember, things change very quickly in the NBA. So if I end up being very wrong about this, that's very much a possibility. Maybe some team that I had in this top 10 makes a terrible trade. Maybe some team that I didn't have in the top 10, like Utah, finally makes a big trade, or maybe they are capable of bottoming out, getting Cooper Flagg. This 2025 draft could completely shake things up as well. So hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.